year. Now, as I've said before, sorry, I lost track of my days. Saturday, Charles Mallet and myself were at the Heritage Party conference. We went because we believe the party's doing some good work. We were invited as guest speakers. What I will say to the audience is we're willing to support any individual or small political party that's really doing good work. On this occasion, it happened to be the Heritage Party. We spoke on the subject of fighting the New World Order, the rules-based international order, as it's often called now. Charles particularly talking about free speech. And a key part of what I was talking about to the audience is you can't fight what you cannot see and you don't understand. And this is why we think the UK column news is so important, because if you understand what's happening around you, you're capable of standing up and doing something about it. And ultimately, of course, the battle is for our minds. This is what we face. This is what the attack is by the deep state and the rules-based international order. It's for our minds and the minds of the children. Now, what was so important about the Heritage Party conference was this is the first time I have ever seen a political party get into the real agendas that people are facing in this country. So they weren't holding back. They were getting into all the key subjects, including the rules-based international order, and they were being very frank in their delivery to the audience. Let's have a little listen to party leader David Curtin.
Well, as I've said before, we're against war, but how much does that cost? $3 billion a year promised to the Zelensky regime? Scrap that, and we'll have that for our nation. $5 billion a year on migrant hotels for illegal migrants? Scrap that. Migrants who come to this country illegally should not be rewarded. They shouldn't even be here, and we can scrap that, and we can scrap the foreign aid budget, which in total is another £12 billion which we have for this country. Let's get rid of all the diversity, inclusion and equality offices. They're just a massive waste of time and money. And while we're at it, we can scrap the Equalities Act, which puts in place this two-tier system that we don't need, because we already have a common law where everyone's equal before the law anyway. We don't need the Equality Act 2010 brought in by Tony Blair, Harriet Harman, or Harriet Harperson as she's often known, and then ratified by Theresa May. We don't need it. Let's get rid of all the climate subsidies, which are a massive waste of money into the black hole of solar barons and wind barons. And the $12 billion that they have pledged to send abroad, I mean, this is absolutely crazy. They're saving £1.5 billion from targeting pensioners, but they're giving 8 times that away to foreign wind barons. Yeah. It's insane. And it is disdain for the people of this country. It needs to stop. And let's defund all the NGOs and all the quangos, which are just an utter waste of money, that are paid by the government to lobby the government in a vicious circle where they then are used to put in more draconian regulations and increase totalitarianism in this country.
Well, interesting, isn't it? Because essentially he's talking about the madness which we've heard in relation to the chicken policy at the start of the news. And he's saying we've got to cut all of this nonsense out in order to get our country back under control and operating normally. But alongside him, some other excellent speakers. I can't do them all, but I've just taken some of the other speakers, of which Dr. Liz Evans, absolutely fantastic. And my goodness, warning about horrors of doctors' surgeries, sending letters to children as young as 11 to engage them in supposed looking after their own health. Let's have a listen to what she said.
Health during COVID. Elderly people were starved of touch, and many died alone, uncomforted by loved ones. Children were denied an education, were forced to wear face masks for hours a day when they did return to school, and were robbed of months of socialisation and playing with their friends. and basic rights such as travel and even entry to shops were made contingent on taking a vaccine, being tested or wearing a mask. As a Christian, and I think Brian said this earlier, I believe you can judge a tree by its fruit. So, to understand if a policy is right or wrong, we must look at the impact. And looking at these pictures, we see pain, suffering, and cruelty. This is what unethical looks like. And most importantly, this was a choice. Political and medical decisions were made in a moral and ethical vacuum.
So that was, of course, only a short excerpt, but she covered some really, really disturbing things. And this was the importance of the conference in my mind. It was dealing with the reality of what's happening in this country. Let's have a listen here to Kim Isherwood talking about what's been going on with children in UK in 2024.
Not only did we get him cancelled, we owned him. He turned to Twitter to complain, and that is a direct quote from Peter Tatchell, by the way. In 30 years I have never been cancelled. We all did the bit until I tried to go to Wales. So not only did we get him cancelled, and then he went to Twitter, he then deleted his tweet, because he didn't want to bring any attention to it. So that, ladies and gentlemen, is one hell of an achievement, and that proves what you can do when you won't put up with this in your own country. So the NSPCC has finally given in, and they have finally given me their research in the form of 2 studies by a female in New South Wales in Australia, Walsh. These 2 studies are simply surveys of sexual prevention programs, ladies and gentlemen. This does not safeguard, this grooms. You say, oh no, they're not going to teach masturbation to 4-year-olds. No way will they do that. Not straight out, no, they go out around it, don't they? So here we've got self-stimulation. They said 241 schools in England, and I'm going to read this out to you. There are rules about touching yourself too.
Well, if people don't know about Public Child Protection Wales and the work of Kim Isherwood and her team, have a look on the UK Column website, search for her name, and you can see the interviews that we've done. Last little clip, this is a very interesting filmmaker, Richard Jeffs, and he was talking about his film exposing all of the rules-based international order and the globalists.
Great Reset campaign, and we just wanted to put this film out with all this information. And that went out, it was called The New Normal. That was in 2020, late 2020. I was a bit concerned because I'm exposing all these people as being corrupt, tyrannical.
In this series, I discover what stakeholder capitalism is and how its inclusive and sustainable policies are changing our society.
Black Lives Matter! Black Lives Matter! Make some noise if you think that trans rights are human rights.
People are dying. Children are starving. Families are fleeing their homes.
I also investigate an initiative called the Great Reset of Capitalism for transitioning us to full stakeholder capitalism by 2030.
The World Economic Forum is now very much engaged into this initiative of shaping a great reset.
This is a time for a great reset.
Reset the ways in which we live.
Join me as I investigate the Great Reset transition to stakeholder capitalism.
So a really fascinating film, a lot of detail, really excellent work by that filmmaker. And of course, did you hear those present booing the king as he appeared on screen in the little film clip? Now, something I pushed to the audience, I think it's absolutely true, is if we look in history, it's only a few people that have taken control of countries, nations, groups of nations in the world. And the devil's disciples, as I've got them here, with it only takes a few. We need to be fully aware that it only takes a few politicians in order to take control of a country to do truly horrific things. But of course, in the background, as we've been covering in the UK column news in recent weeks, we've got to be aware of the New World Order and what it means and the organisations involved. Here we're calling it the Underworld Order because, of course, criminality is an inherent part. And just remind our audience that Mike Robinson back in 2009 was highlighting the emergence of the New World Order. This is an independent article where the journalist is saying that Joe Biden caused uproar by using the phrase of the New World Order, but he said it was an unfortunate choice of words. Well, it wasn't an unfortunate choice of words, it was the real thing. This is the sort of journalist, this is Joe Sommerlad. He's really interested in US politics or cinema, novels, insolent noise, but basically another man who appears ignorant of what's actually going on. Let's just have a look at this little clip with Gordon Brown to understand that when they talk about a new world order, rules-based international order, they absolutely mean what they say.
All these new challenges are bringing together about the biggest restructuring we have ever seen, not just of the global economy, but of the global order as a whole. And 200 years ago, a famous British Foreign Secretary said that the new world had been called into existence to redress the balance of the old. In 1990, another old world ended, dominated by the Cold War, and people talked then, in 1990, of a new world order. What they actually meant then was a new political order. And what was not foreseen then, but is obvious now from everything that we see and do, what we experience in every day of our life, is the sheer scale and speed and scope of globalization. And it's only now that we can begin to understand that the world order that globalization brings and what it's going to look like, it's driven forward now not just by the balance of military strength, the Cold War times, or ordinary political power. It's being driven forward by a seismic shift in economic power that we see around us. But what does the New World Order mean for countries like ours who are looking to succeed? I suggest that the countries...
Well, I think we've heard enough of that. We get the point. I'd just like to say to the audience that, of course, it's the UK column that's been warning about what's been happening. This was our report at the time of the New World Order coming, Gordon Brown talking about it, and we deliberately used the colours of red and black. And I'll just very quickly say that at the conference, many people talking on key areas where we have to fight in order to fight against this rules-based international order, whether it's free speech or sticking up for the state and the nation. Okay, we had to eat, but also here protecting our children, looking after the Constitution, looking after animals, an important part of staying well and mentally healthy. The New World Order wants to destroy faith in God, but at the end of the day, it's the local councillors who are fighting the battle, which are important. And I also reminded people to be happy whilst they are standing up to be counted. Ben, very briefly, you've got a little video clip here, but you're aware of yet more parts of our fundamental infrastructure being closed.
Absolutely, yes. So I took this short film earlier, not this week, last week. I was up in Nottingham for a few days, and this was on the coach journey on the way back. You can see the video on the right-hand side there, and that is Ratcliffe-on-Soar Power Station. And today marks the day when it will be closed and we will transition into a coal-free era. And you can see a little post from LinkedIn on the left-hand side from E3G, which is a climate group run by former Blair people. They were advising him while he was in number 10, which is also directly linked to the Club of Rome. The president of the Club of Rome, Sandrine Dixon de Clèves, sits on the board of E3G. So this is part of delivering this international agenda. And I'll just read out a couple of key points while the video plays. It does look quite majestic, I think, the power station there on the right-hand side. You know, I always thought it was a bit of an eyesore growing up, but it feels quite poignant looking at it here. So as they say in the post here, as we approach October 1st, the UK will celebrate an historic milestone, the first day of the coal-free power era. following the closure of the Ratcliffe-on-Soar coal power plant at midnight on September 30th. This coal phase-out moment marks a significant turning point in our energy transition. How we achieved it, I'll just riff on a couple of these points here. By setting ambitious climate targets, so the 2008 Climate Change Act marked the beginning of the phase-out journey. That was obviously under Blair. Critical regulations. In 2009, Energy Secretary Ed Miliband announced the end of new unabated coal projects, signaling a decisive shift away from coal. Investing in alternatives, so this is a multi-party thing, so the Conservative and Liberal Democrat coalition government in 2013 invested heavily in the wind industry to make coal less attractive. And then they introduced market reforms for renewables, which facilitated huge investments in power infrastructure and allowed greater integration of renewable energy into the grid. And they see this as a template for international development. I think this is really crucial for people to understand. The UK is at the vanguard of this transformation. And they talk here about the Powering Past Coal Allowance, which includes 181 national, subnational and non-state actors who are committed to ending unabated coal power, who are going to be implementing similar plans over the coming years. So this is the end of an era, and I will certainly be interested to see what happens next. But as you said, Brian, it feels like a deliberate degradation of national sovereignty and capability.
And of course, Ben, this is not national policy. This is international globalist policy, wrecking our infrastructure and our country.